Hi folks, with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the wider issue of globalization and how at every level and wherever there is money, the globalists are busy rerouting that money into their own pockets and the pockets of their buddies and their propagandists, their talking heads and so on. You know, their NGO flunky mates and all that sort of thing. And it's happening again all over. So wherever there are concentrations of money, such as, you know, taxation money or monopolies, oligopolies and so on, that's where you'll find the rerouting and the wastage and the moving money around. So if there's a huge loss-making exercise, they'll just move that loss-making exercise off a government balance sheet and onto a third party, for example. So in that way, the government can avoid being audited and avoid accountability. But it's the same thing now. That the Western economies that were once very competitive, innovative economies are more and more slipping into just abject and total cronyism, where the only people getting serious money are the ones that are really, you know, have got their hands in the till, effectively, their hands in the cookie jar. And so I just want to take a little look at that. And I'll give some small examples, but there are many. Now, you know, if I look at the stock market, a much smaller stock market, you know, 30, 40 years ago, nearly every company in the top, not every company, but nearly every company in, say, the top 100 companies was in some sort of a competitive market situation. Now, there were some that had, you know, oligopolies and that sort of thing, but they were, you know, almost sub-controlled by trade unions. You've got a monopoly, your profits are big, so the unions are going to really extract every penny we can out of you. So the monopoly became sort of counterproductive in a number of ways, and that was one of them. But most of the businesses were operating in a fairly competitive market. Now, you know, really you've got to have more than 5 competitors before you can truly claim it's competitive. But nonetheless, now if I look at that same top 100 companies today, in Australia, nearly all of them are either government subsidised, government protected, or monopolies, oligopolies, cartels. Nearly every fucking one. And we see something, I think, you know, fairly similar all across the Western world now. And as manufacturing and innovation and all these sort of things are either outsourced or in effect shut down, although, you know, President Trump's trying to reverse that in the United States. What we're seeing now is that the Western economies are relying almost completely on finance, insurance, and real estate. And these three industries are notoriously corrupt and have large sort of armies of parasites feeding off them. And in order to feed all these parasites, these globalist parasites, whether they be NGO CEOs on $1 million a year who effectively do nothing, it doesn't matter, but that the parasite class grows larger and larger. And of course, they're the ones that are supporting mass migration and so on. Now, this is a small example, but it illustrates, I think, very clearly and concisely what's going on. Now, there's often we have some neighbours that frequently go away on vacation, and we look after their pets for them, and so, you know, I take the dog down to the local park and give it a walk, that sort of thing. Now, the park's a decent size. It's one of the larger parks in the area, and it's got like a dog walking. Well, pretty much the whole park's a dog walking section. But because of the size of it, they've got sort of 3 shower and toilet type blocks for things like sports fixtures and so on. So they have, you know, the local council employed cleaners to you know, like a groundskeeper or you know, a park ranger, or call them what you like, to go and maintain the grounds and, you know, fix the fences, keep the toilets clean, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. lock them up. They get locked up at night. Now, the council employed, I think they had like 10 parks in the area of different sizes. And the 2 or 3 largest parks had like a permanent groundsman working there. The smaller ones, there'd be one guy would do, say, 3 in a day. So I think they had, from as far as I can recall, they had something like 5 people who were maintaining the park, and they're quite well maintained. The facilities were always pretty good, or I thought anyway. And other things like dog poo bags and all that sort of thing were there. And I thought it was quite a well-run, maintained thing. Anyway, they decided to. Now this is a council that talks tough about how they're big on reducing expenses. So they employed 1,000 people, but now they only employ 950 because they're kick-ass fiscal managers. So I think, well, 950, employing 50 less people, that's good for taxpayers and so on. That's nothing wrong with that. That's good. But then when you sort of look more closely at it, what you realise is they haven't actually cut staff at all. What they've done is they've employed an army of outsourced consultants, as they call it, and this number handsomely exceeds the amount of people they laid off. So they've got something in the order of 300 of these external consultants, and some of these groups and companies that have this being paid very well, exceptionally well, in fact. So it's costing them, with these five people with their vehicles and their equipment, it's costing the council, give or take, about $400,000 a year to employ these people. So they've gone out to tender, and they've now employed a company to do all the maintenance of the parks and the grounds and do that sort of stuff. So the same scope of work as the employees were doing, but instead of $400,000 a year, they're paying over $1 million a year. And you say, okay, well, maybe the council's getting extra service or better service or better quality service. No, quite the opposite. So this company that gets paid over $1 million a year to do the same as the guys who were laid off, they exclusively employ third world peasants to do the work. So the third world peasants come out twice a day to clean the toilets. Once at about 8 o'clock in the morning and around 3 in the afternoon. And the council still has to employ a guy to go around and lock up the facilities at night. So there's no saving there. So they've still got some of that $400,000. They've still actually kept some of those costs. They've just classified them differently. So I had a little look at this, and the councils and government bodies, they have to post, on what they're paying these organisations, and they've done a bit of a sleazy deal. They supposedly went out to tender, but they claimed falsely, in my view, that only one company responded. So what could we do? We have to accept that tender, and the tender happened to be just over $1 million. Now, if you're a council concerned about the people's taxes and you don't want to waste the taxpayers' money, if you're paying $400,000 with employees, and you get rid of those employees, and then you pay over $1 million to actually get less work done than you were getting previously, that's hardly saving taxpayers' money. So if you start doing, and it doesn't take much actually, you start doing a little bit of looking around, and you find that the organisation that won the tender is actually a subsidiary of another organisation that's part of an NGO that's very activist in pushing climate change and things like that. So clearly the council is rewarding their buddies. And again, you're looking at it's the parasitic exercise here. So you're getting a worse job done and paying 2.5 times, nearly 3 times, 2.5 times more to get that job done. There was no competitive tender. I just reading between the lines, I'd say they brought out the tender at 5 minutes to 5 on a Friday, and had it closing at 8 o'clock on a Monday, and only this one outfit who had the inside running was told about it, and they letters would have gone out maybe on Sunday, emails, no one had any time to respond. And so that was effectively shepherded and awarded, sleazy backroom under the table deal awarded to this one organisation. So now the taxpayers are paying far more and getting a much lesser service. And you could look at almost anything where you see governments involved, where there's now more people working for government than there has ever been. Now, they may not be direct government employees, but they're working for consultancies and all sorts of groups like this dude's cleaning the toilets and that sort of stuff for the council. They're numbering in the gazillions, these people. So the government can say, well, we did have 20% of the population used to work for government. Now we've reduced it to 17%. Look how efficient we are. That's capitalism at work. But in reality, they've got 30% of the population. I mean, for example, 30% of the population working for government, because now they're all employed by these external groups, and many of them have got requirements that we'll give you all this money, but you've got to employ third world illiterate peasant migrants. Now, you've got to employ lots of Indians and so on. So you see in these things, you barely see a white face in any of these outsourced groups. The guys at the top raking in the money and the big bucks, they're the white boys, and they're the globalization supporters and so on. But the rest of them are all peasants and so on that are doing the grunt work, cleaning the toilets and whatever. Now this is something that, and there are little contracts being awarded all over the place, and none of these contracts work value for money. Looking after the taxpayers' dollars. It's quite the opposite. Every expenditure is looked at of which one of our friends can we reward with this taxpayer money. That's it. There is no other criteria. That whether you can do the job or not, irrelevant. The only thing is which one of our friends can we reward, and we have to make sure we don't reward people who are not our friends. So this is what I mean by a crony economy. And this is what's happening, and it's huge and widespread. Now, you look at the people that are now employed directly and indirectly by government through them outsourcing contracts. So the number of people employed, directly employed by government is huge. But there's no competitive bidding. Vast sums are being disgorged again into the pockets of friends, relatives, concubines, globalist supporters, and the United Nations. These people are getting calls. The United Nations call up, so we're sending one of our friends over there, and she needs a nice $1 million a year gig. Can you fix her up? Yeah, no problem. And it doesn't matter whether it's the arts. There was a radical Palestinian activist came to Australia running around, and I did a little bit of looking, and she was like staying in 5-star hotels, was eating lobster on the waterfront, and this and that, and the next thing, and all that was funded by an arts council that had just received a very large grant from the government. So they were laundering the money through the arts council to richly reward this Palestinian chick who was supposedly a consultant and was living 5-6-star type. No, she's very bright. I mean, it's not like she's a genius or she had some merit to it all. She was just an activist that they wanted to use, some activist poster chick. And so she was very, very richly rewarded. But this is happening everywhere. Now, when we look at the amount of people employed by government and indirectly employed through these consultancies and backroom sleazy deals and so on, we then need to look at the amount of organisations that are effectively doing the frontline dirty work for the government and bringing out vast numbers of, third world peasants. Bringing out tens of thousands of Indians for jobs that don't exist. So they invent these bullshit jobs. And then give them, and then say we can't find these people in Australia, and the government then gives them a blanket amnesty to bring over as many Indians or third world people as they want, and then they give them these non-existent bullshit jobs, and then they go to the government and say, okay, now we need more money to cover all the costs. You go, nah, not a problem. And more taxpayer money is disgorged into their pockets. So they're a very profitable enterprise. They're diabolically run, mismanaged, useless people, top, bottom, and middle and center, and back and front. But this is how it's done. So the entire Western economy has become a money laundering machine for the globalists, and it's getting worse and worse. And market competition and capitalism, as we once knew it, is disappearing out the back door, and we are just left with the crony economy, with these sleazy deals being all over the place. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback Challenge. Thank you for listening.